What is up, guys? RLTK PHX Real Talk Phoenix Podcast, episode 34.
34.
It's kind of strange right now because we haven't been sitting like this in a while. And if you guys remember, several episodes ago, before our old friend Rona hit, we kind of like set up the podcast studio. Like we built this thing out in the crib.
Yeah.
And we got sound panels on the walls and all those different types of things. And we were just getting ready to go and everything got crazy. And so we've been Zooming for forever, and now we're finally kind of together again.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited about that. What are you guys? Pretty excited to be together?
Yeah, hopefully we survive this podcast and we don't get coronavirus.
Right? I mean,
we're not really socially distancing
we temperature
right now.
checked before we came in.
This is a terrible example, children. Yes. Don't follow.
Do as I say, not as I do, right?
Exactly.
Hashtag boomer.
We're actually going to be talking about some of that.
Hashtag boomer.
Okay, boomer. But yeah, it's a strange time. Obviously, we know we're in Phoenix. The governor came down just today and was talking about everybody wearing masks. We're like one of the highest populations for COVID in America right now. And however you view that, whether it's because we're testing a bunch or whether it's because, what's the other reason we're testing a bunch, or because there's been a spike. Yeah, underreported. There's been a spike in numbers because of the protests, which is something else we're going to talk about today. And so, yeah, we've been really hanging out in current events. We've been hanging out in Black Lives Matter, kind of the systemic racism, oppression conversation. And we even last week had our friend Caleb on, who was talking about how white supremacy has shaped America. And so what we wanted to do today was just kind of get back to our roots a little bit, because obviously our organization is all about reaching Gen Z, right? Reaching the younger generation and influencing them in a way that would cause them to live and fulfill the destinies that they have and do incredible things in our world, right? And in order for that to happen, they need mentorship, they need leadership, they need wisdom. But the way that Gen Z needs it is very different from the way that generations have needed it previously. And if we don't pay attention to this, we're going to lose them.
Yeah,
it's just the reality. We're going to lose them. And we find ourselves in a pivotal cultural moment right now because this generation is maybe more justice oriented than we've seen in a really long time.
What do you think the reason for that is?
I think the reason for that is that they have grown up in a world where they have seen injustice at a mass scale through social media.
Yeah.
They've seen it at a mass scale through social media, and I think there's a level of maybe cultural intelligence is the right way to put it.
Or
there's a level
like
of
global citizenship.
Yeah, there's a level of understanding that they have about the world, and so like they perceive things at young ages that we weren't perceiving at their age.
Right.
We
didn't see the world the way they see it.
We weren't thinking about racism. We weren't thinking about socioeconomic inequality. We weren't thinking about sexual ethics and all those different types of things, but they're thinking and processing through all this stuff. And there could be tons of that happening even in the context of their high school, you know, because we live in a country where there's a lot of people that immigrate. I mean, I'm an immigrant myself, right?
Yeah.
And so just them growing up in this different kind of world and different kind of space, I think has caused them to be way more justice and compassion oriented. They seem to really care about people. What do you guys think?
Let's ask the Gen Z.
What do you think, Gen Z?
Yeah,
He's gonna say I'm totally lying. Everything I said's wrong.
Completely off.
Fact check me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys in what you guys were saying. I think that Gen Z, we see the world differently, and we're not going to put up with the things that past generations put up with. Now we'll see what happens after the Rona and all these protests and where things shift and how they shift, right? But you can see that Gen Z is trying to make an impact. I mean, you see people, you see kids in other countries or Gen Zers in other countries protesting for Black Lives Matter.
Isn't that crazy?
Like, you see that in other countries, right? Because they're trying to take a stand against racism in another country. Where racism could be worse, it could be better over there, right? But they're taking a stance over there to support people here in America.
Do you think that they have like this sense of unity over that, like responsibility for like standing up for George Floyd, even though it didn't happen in their country? That's one thing that I've seen that's kind of just like, I don't know, unique about this, that it's not just something local that's happening in our communities, which obviously it's happening in our communities. But, you know, they're protesting in the UK. They're protesting in Africa.
I think the reason that's happened is I think social media, right? Globalization has made us much closer.
Probably what Alex was saying.
100%. But I think Gen Z is interacting and having conversations in ways that we never did, right? And mobilizing each other in ways that we never did.
Social media.
Yeah, and once again, they're compassion oriented, I think justice oriented, and so they're willing to stand up. And then also, it seems like to me, Black Lives Matter at this point has become more about championing anywhere where somebody's oppressed. And because I was watching the news a few weeks back, and it just swept through Berlin in Germany.
Wow.
And there was this woman of African descent on the TV talking about, man, the reason why we jumped on this thing is because, there's oppression here. Like, I experienced racism as an African person in Germany. Wow. And so we're not going to tolerate it either. And so it seems like
young people, in the Gen Zers,
in the wake up. Well, this was it seemed like this one was probably a millennial.
Okay.
But I mean, even as
that's true, millennials.
Yeah,
too.
even as I see it, I think millennials, like because I'm a millennial, I feel like we understood that stuff was wrong, but we were a little bit more tolerant. Like, okay, we're gonna wait until you guys die off and then we'll fix it. Gen Z is like, we ain't waiting. You know what I'm saying?
That's
like,
true.
We're not waiting. If you don't change now, we're gonna crush your institution, or we're gonna take your institution. We're gonna starve your institution. Either way, we're gonna get rid of it.
And here's how I'm seeing it.
Like, your world is obsolete. So like, either you get with the program or move out the way. And we know you're gonna move out the way anyways, because you ain't got that much longer left. Yeah. So we're just gonna ignore you until you
do what we want.
Pass on.
I mean, think about Netflix. You know why Netflix changed back to allowing people to have multiple profiles on there? Remember, they were trying to stop that where you couldn't share profiles because Gen Zers were like, "This doesn't make sense." Our buddies,
because they share passwords with their friends and stuff.
Yeah, and so they're like, "How come I live in an apartment and 4 people in this apartment have to share and all have a Netflix account?" You know what I mean? And so basically, what happened was Gen Z said, "Fine, I'll just cancel the subscription."
Yep, they started canceling like crazy.
And people talk about, cancel culture. I mean, what is it that we've been taught if boycotting isn't a thing? You know what I mean? I mean that's capitalism.
It's kind of the fabric of what it means to be American.
Exactly,
right?
and then
I
everyone's
can put my dollars wherever I want.
Exactly, and so
if I don't want to put my dollars in your thing, I won't.
And I think that when we talk about these things, people think that we sound bombastic, and perhaps it sounds bombastic, but you're not noticing the things that are very important, like people deciding, young people deciding, I'm not going to buy your brands anymore. I'm not going to purchase your product anymore. I'm not going to come to your church anymore. Like, this is the thing that I think people who are in positions...
I'm not going to come to your house anymore. I'm not going to
work for your business.
Socialize with you as a family. Don't have to.
Yeah. That's what I think Alex means when you're saying, like, not putting up with it, right? Like,
yeah, 100%. I think one of the most important things right now for Gen Zers is to have people who care about them in their lives, right? People who are actually going to mentor them and love them. And at the end of the day, I think people, and I would say it's probably more the Gen Xers and the Boomers that are in positions of power in whatever institution you're talking about, right? Hold this thing of power over them. When in reality, the thing is, whether it's an institution of a business, a church, or whatever, right? If it's a church, well, I can go online and look at someone who preaches better than you, who has a prettier church, who has better worship. If it's a business, I can buy from this company that sells it to me cheaper, or does this and that, right? But Gen Zers, like, the only thing that those people have to offer Gen Zers is their personal relationship with them. And when they don't offer that personal relationship with them, it's when Gen Zers give them the finger and they just turn around. Because Gen Zers can get whatever you have to offer to them besides yourself, they can go get someone else. The only thing that you can offer them for them to stay is yourself. And I think,
so true.
And I've worked in institutions like that. I've been at places like that where the upper leadership is like that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not putting up with you. I don't care. I'm done.
That's so crazy, man.
It's good.
That really is a difference in thinking generationally.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to put up with terrible bosses, like when I was a kid growing up, just because, you had to take the jobs that you had in the area. Yep. There wasn't the internet, where you could just find jobs everywhere,
Yeah.
And so, man, you just had to deal with people, And so part of me thinks, like, dang, is Gen Z learning how to really do relationships? Is this something that could be difficult for them? But then at the same time, Gen Z may be showing us, like, hey, You don't have to put up with that crap. Maybe the point is that we've learned how to just suck it up and keep a stiff upper lip and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and all this BS that we learned from the generations before us. And Gen Z saying, let me really show you how to live.
No,
you know what I mean?
Bro, I agree. I think too, because there's a lot of things happening in our world right now, and I think our goal with this podcast is to kind of give a little bit of commentary on what we're seeing with Gen Z as they engage these issues. So let's start with first things first, Rona or COVID-19. As that hit, what were you seeing, or what? And I'll jump in on this too. But what were you guys seeing from Gen Z as COVID started to circulate and as people started to have all these opinions about it? You know, there's varying perspectives. It's real. It's fake. It's man-made. It doesn't exist. It's a government ploy. You know, conspiracy theory type stuff, New World Order type stuff, and then, you know, hey, people aren't taking this seriously, and people are dying as a consequence. What have you guys seen from Gen Z as the COVID conversation has been happening over the past few months?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've seen about Gen Z is that, like, kind of like how you guys, how we were saying, is that they care about others, right? So I've seen a lot of Gen Zers, you know, social distancing and trying to do the best to care for other people, right? And on the other end, I think just like in any other generation and other people, you have people that are both sides on the issue, that, you know, it's not as a big deal as it is, or it is, right? But I think that's the way that I've seen it mostly. I've seen people, you know, post about it and trying to social distance. And to be honest with you, I've seen people make the best out of it. Like when I go, there's this gym that I go to close to my house. And depending on what time of day I go, like when I'd go at night and I'd leave, there'd be these kids, and they would each pull up their car, socially distancing, and then just open the trunk and just sit in the trunk and just talk to each other like that, like respecting each other's space, you know? So I think that's a really cool way of looking at it, and I think that's the way that Gen Z, they're trying to make the best out of what they can. Like I've seen kids do their homemade proms and their homemade like graduation ceremonies, right? Like they're just trying to make the best that they can out of this, because I think at this point, at this point, one of the things that I've seen with Gen Z is that kind of like the meme culture, right? If we laugh about something, we're not hurting. So it's almost like, man, what else can happen now? You know, like people are making jokes about, you know, the end of the world, you know, next week per se, or whatever.
That's how you cope with it, though,
yeah, because that's how you cope with it.
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day, and it was like July 2020, and it was a scene from Independence Day. Alien spaceship turns up over like New York, and it's like, what could happen next? You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I definitely think for them, like you said, making fun of it is a way to kind of deal with how hard of a time this has been for them. I mean, graduations ruined, right? Like moments where, you know, you're entering into that next stage in life totally snatched from you.
Right.
That's got to be tough, man, like really tough. And that's not the first time that stuff like this has happened to them. Like this generation has grown up in the midst of financial, socioeconomic issues, school shootings, weird things happening at the border, you know, sexual ethics kind of developing.
Human trafficking.
Some remember 9/11.
You know what I'm saying? It's so it's like there are so many things that have happened to this generation, I think, and so many things that they've seen. And then like from a global perspective, right, there's things that they probably know that have happened around the world that I can't even remember. You know, I think about Boko Haram. I think about just some of the terrible things that have happened. You know, shootings where, you know, who's that guy, Dylan Roof? You know, ran up in a church and killed a bunch of people.
And you know, they said that he prayed with those people too.
Before he shot him. And so there's like, well, his intention was to start a race war, right? That's what that was in his manifesto. But like, they've grown up in the midst of so much stuff. I just see a resilience in them, man. Like, and I know that
they're showing us what really matters.
They've been mocked, and I know we've talked about this previously, as a generation that's not very resilient. But perhaps that isn't true.
Perhaps they're the most resilient.
Maybe it's that they just don't tolerate BS.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like,
you can't tolerate this stuff. What's wrong with you?
And maybe it's that they don't see the need, and Alex,
Yeah.
obviously you can kind of speak into this. They don't see the need to pay their dues the same way we did. They don't see the need to take that long, hard road if they don't need to. You know
Well,
what
I
I'm
think
saying?
what it is they've seen their parents do the right thing
And it not work.
and it not work. I've seen,
Yeah.
look at the stock market. Look at all of the things that have been so volatile, the wars that we fought and pulled out of and things not being fixed. I mean, like Alex was saying, since 9/11, if you just kind of take a snapshot of the years after 9/11, there's been like thing after thing. I mean, the things in London,
There's a lot of stuff that, I mean,
the two bombings, like there's just been like I'd say an era of violence,
that's a good way to put it, bro.
And here we are now with another, violence in schools, violence from the police, the people who are supposed to protect you.
Yeah.
So I think that there's this attitude that Gen Z has about institutionalism, about all of them, and they look at everyone who's supposed to be their leaders, and they're basically kind of like, seriously?
Well, this guy,
So, you're not going to do anything. And then they look at our older generations who are perfectly comfortable putting people into positions of leadership that may not perhaps be a good leader, but because they're willing to jeopardize the whole for their own thing. I think Gen Z sees that too, just like as far as their leadership, like why they're drawn to more like calm older leaders. I saw an interesting fact on Joe Biden that for some reason like people feel safer with him. Younger people feel safer with him. Yeah,
it's interesting
because of his age. Like he's an older grandpa figure. You get what I'm saying? And so the way that this is kind of back what to you were saying earlier. Gen Z is kind of like, I can get the best of everything on the internet. So basically, if I don't have you, then what do you have to offer me?
Well, so here's the thing too. I think there's a misconception of past generations of what it means to be resilient, right? So, perfect example, that 70s show, right? You have, it's based in the 70s, and the high school kids in the show would be the boomers now, today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see the relationship between like a dad and a son in that show, and it's not loving, it's this, hey, no, we don't talk about our feelings here, son, just keep that inside, right? So when I see older generations, their way of resilience is to just quote unquote deal with it and fake it, where our newer generation is like, no, why can't I talk about my feelings? Why can't I go see a therapist? Why can't I take medication for my depression, right? PTSD, all this stuff is coming out, right? Like we're realizing that that's not what it meant to be manly. And I think when older generations look down on us, they see that because they think that we're not resilient because we're maybe more emotional. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point.
When actually it's a strength.
It is a strength. You're able to look inside of yourself and realize that there's something wrong with you, and then you're willing to start unpeeling the onion.
That's really interesting to think about because, once again, I think one of the earmarks of Gen Z, and I think even we've talked about this, and I think this is the beauty of having conversation. As you have conversation, your thoughts and perspectives continue to evolve and change on certain things, right, as you become more informed. But as I think about this, we've always said that. I think Gen Z has high emotional intelligence, but I don't think they've been known, and I haven't always seen Gen Z do a good job of processing their emotions. But at the same time, if we look at what came before them, they did an even worse job of processing their emotions. So like, how can we expect Gen Z to do a good job of processing their emotions when we don't even talk about emotions?
But they're valuing them.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and in that
why
sense,
do they value them?
And in that sense, they're more mature.
Because
at least they're willing to come out and say like, hey, I feel this way and I don't know how to deal with it.
That's why I was saying, I think that they looked at their parents' lives and they said, yeah, mom and dad, we have the nice neighborhood. Yeah, mom and dad, we have the nice cars, but you hate each other. I don't like, you're alcoholics. You're doing everything you can to maintain this American dream. And it's like, what is it ultimately that older generations have been trying to give their kids? Like, what is it?
Well, ultimately, right, we're getting to this idea of money being the thing that rules everything, and the best.
It's not just money.
Okay.
It's like a ridiculous amount, it seems to me. When I consider, like, I have friends all over the world, and some of them, I mean, literally came from villages You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And live in, have lived in much dire straits than anyone that I really know here in the States. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But there's this optimism, there's this joy, there's this happiness. There's not this sense of like, I've really been robbed in life. You know what I mean? And sometimes when you see things here, I think in America, it's like we think the way to make people happy is to give them more stuff. And I think that's what we've done with our kids. You know what I mean? Like give them more and more and more stuff. And they're like, man, I don't need more stuff. I need, kind of like what you were saying. This generation is like, I can get stuff anywhere. You know, I can be a streamer, a YouTube streamer, make my own money, buy my own stuff. Like, do I have you? And I think that's the thing that ultimately is kind of, even with our society, as we interact more on social media, man, to have someone physically in your life.
And that's where a lot of people don't understand with this, like the older generation doesn't understand this whole thing of like, you know, just throw a fact in someone's face and be like, well, facts don't care about your feelings, or these statistics and, you know, like this, you know, educated answer, right? Like that's
be
not
a robot.
Gonna work.
I only respond to facts.
That's not going to work.
It's true. And I think,
you know what I'm saying?
And I was sharing this with my buddy earlier as I went and did a thing at their church, right? I was talking about orthodoxy and orthopraxy, but there's also something called autopathy. And it's kind of like the idea of processing through your emotions. And now that's as it relates to God, right? But the reality is we have so done away with or discarded the inner life in America, right? And it's all about what I have and what I can see, taste, touch, feel. And it's not about what's going on the inside and how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about life, how we feel about our family and our friends and different things of that nature. And so we've just departed from that. And I think a lot of that is because the thing that we herald most in this culture is empiricism, right? We herald science and math.
Explain okay.
2 and 2 plus 2 has
scientific
to equal 4,
method.
right? Yes.
Right.
And so because I can't scientifically prove something, it must mean that it's not true. And that's not true.
Right.
Well,
the
thing about that's interesting too is like, you know, the person that can bring data to prove it, like, well, where are you bringing that data from? How are you doing the data, right? So like it's biased, right? No matter kind of
all data is biased. All data is biased.
Rhetoric.
All data is
because
rhetoric.
you have to interpret the data. Anytime a human being picks up anything and reads it or processes it and regurgitates it, they're doing it through the lens by which they interpret
exactly
that particular thing, right? It's the same reason why we could take all the punctuation out of a sentence and all three of us read it a completely different way.
Right.
Because it's how we interpret the sentence.
Right.
Based on how we learn in school, based on how our parents speak to us, based on how we speak now, based on, you know what I'm saying, all those different types of things that play a part in how we interpret the world. And I think one of the things that the moderns did, the boomers, right, was they're super cranial, logical, and they kind of threw away that in a hard life. And what we're seeing is a swing in the other direction in a postmodern sense. And so as I think about this as it pertains to emotions and corona or coronavirus, right? One of the things that I think made me sad about what Gen Z's gone through is because of their outward emotionalness and them processing through that stuff and perhaps not always knowing how to deal with it. Obviously, we've seen a spike in mental health issues, right? As kids have been more sequestered to their homes and unable to connect with their structures that have kind of like held them and propped them up in life, right? Teachers and friends and structure that they got in class and I mean
athletics.
Exactly. Like so all coaches that was removed, right? All those things that helped make your life what it was have been removed. And so we've seen them struggle. And I mean, I know for me personally, man, like 3 or 4 weeks in, bro, I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Like it just started to feel really strange. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe
like
for
that
people,
frustration started to settle in, and I'm a 30-year-old man, so I can't imagine what that felt like for a 15-year-old girl or boy. You know what I'm saying?
I think for some people, who have grown up with stability in their lives, these times feel strange. But for people like myself who've grown up in unstable times, times like these are exciting. And I don't know how to explain it any other way, because I can think of when I was a kid, I'd be in a bad situation, and whenever something really bad happened, that always meant I was moving. I was going somewhere else. I was getting out of it.
You learn how to thrive in chaos.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
And there are people like that.
Yeah. And so I think that that's true of an entire generation, though.
Okay.
And I think that this generation has been baptized in chaos. And so for them, you know, the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and all of that stuff, it's like, that is not an American dream, that's an American fantasy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they see that as absolute nonsense. Like, you guys are tripping. That's a good point.
Exactly. When and especially when they consider all the things that have to be done to achieve that. You get what I'm saying? Because there's a certain way that generations before have said, do this, and that's what'll get you there. And what Gen Z is,
found out that's not true.
And here's essentially what I see with Gen Z, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. They're saying, I'm not going to sacrifice my temporary happiness for long-term pleasure, because I don't even know if long-term's a thing. This thing called marriage that was supposed to be till death do us part, I saw my parents not keep their word on that. This thing called school, the people who are supposed to protect me and love me, they're not doing enough to outlaw guns and to keep it out. Like, obviously corporate interest matters more than my own life. So this place that I'm supposed to go
stuff, so they're not just saying
they've researched it. And you want to talk about statistics and data? Gen Z will whoop out data on you quicker than anyone knows.
Don't even bring up the church.
Oh,
that's when things get really bad.
Yeah. So for me, I think with Gen Z, the issue is a little bit deeper than just, you know, they have a way of laughing stuff off. Like, these guys are much deeper, you know, in their thoughts about these things. And so I think for us who are the older generations that are looking to kind of like help lead them, we got to be real conscientious of that.
Well, yeah, I think, and I said this the other day. Gen Z is ready to lead, but there's not that many people that are ready to lead them.
What do you mean?
Well, so easily
because they want to lead them their way.
Yeah. So Gen Z. So okay. So you have a grandma, right? Who's teaching a grandma how to use her phone? Her grandkid. Right, so her grandkids teaching grandma something now, which in past generations it was never like that.
Right.
So now you have kids that know how to use technology to, you know, reach their friend in another country and donate money to them and do all this. Like, kids are ready to lead because, but they don't have people around them that are actually pouring into them the right way and mentoring them the right way. Not like how you said, just trying to get something out of them, just like walking with them through their decisions. Dang. Like, there's nothing I can tell. So I have a younger sister, right? And like, we have conversations all the time, and there's nothing like I can't tell her what to do. It's, hey, this is my experience. I've done this, and this is what's happened to me, and these are your options if you do it. Now, I don't know which one's going to happen. That's your decision to make. I can't make the decision for you. And even if I told her what to do, she would be like, well, all my friends are doing it, or, well, this statistic said this, or, you know, like, the world works differently like this, right? Like in any other institution where they tell you how to do it, and then you realize that, well, no one else is doing it this way anymore.
Right.
Like, I was working at a place where I had to fill, like, I had to get a check to go do something instead of, like, having a card or money. It's so weird.
The way that everyone does everything all the time.
I've never used a check in my life.
This is how we do stuff around here.
Yes. I've never used a check in my whole life. That was the first time I did it, and they looked at me like I was an idiot, basically.
Wow.
Even though they never taught me to use I was supposed to use a check.
Yeah, and so, you know, kind of to circle back around to my point, Gen Z is not going to wait on their happiness because they understand that they could die at any moment. What has school taught them? What has coronavirus taught them? What has police brutality taught them? At any point in time, because you're black, because you're unhealthy, or because you go to school, your life could end because the people in authority over you, the government who should help you with healthcare, your parents who should vote and get these gun laws dealt with, they're not going to protect you. The government's not going to protect you. Who's going to protect you? You. And so Gen Z is like, no one's going to protect me. I got to protect myself. Do what my elders are telling me so that I might get happiness one day if I survive this Holocaust called life. You know, so there, and I say that to laugh so that we don't cry, but man, can people listen to the stuff I've just rattled off? Like, These kids, as I said earlier, have been baptized in violence, in chaos. And so how can you expect them not to value...
That's interesting you say that, because we always chalk that up to video games and all the things that they're consuming online, but it's like...
It's the political decisions that their parents made about the wars that we got into, the laws that we allowed to be passed,
the schools that we let go to. It's like we miss...
It's our responsibility, and we're blaming them. That's why they look back on us and they say, these are the leaders? Nuh-uh.
You guys are jokers. Man, it's good, bro. So transitioning a little bit, let's dive into piece 2, which is obviously the Black Lives Matter movement that's kind of blown up right now. We kind of touched on it a little bit in the beginning, and I want to touch on it a little bit here as well, as we see, and I don't know about you guys, but as I've been paying attention, I just see droves of young people, man.
Yeah.
Teenagers out there. I see young Latinos, young whites, young blacks, right? Out there marching in the streets, protesting. I mean, obviously there's been some rioting and different things of that nature. What's cool now is that stuff's gone away and people are still peacefully protesting consistently. I mean, there's a protest this weekend, right? And so, what do you guys think about that? What do you guys think Gen Z seeing and hearing and doing in the midst of the death of George Floyd, which obviously is the seed that went into the ground and made this whole thing erupt? I mean, whatever you think about him doesn't matter. The fact is his death triggered something that has set off this global chain reaction, right? And for whatever reason, people have said, we're not going to tolerate it anymore. And like I said, we're seeing Gen Z, like, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And so why is that? What's happening? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I think the way that I see it, and I think it's a beautiful thing that people are coming together, right? Again, regardless of where people stand on the issue, I think it's beautiful to see people come together in times like this. I think is amazing. I think the younger generation, in many cases, right, they've seen their mothers and fathers and their grandparents do this thing in life, right, and never get anywhere, right? It's almost like they work, 18 hours a day, and then tomorrow, all the money that they spend goes pretty much back to their employer because they gotta, pay rent and do all these things, right? So and so they've lived seeing their parents and their grandparents almost have no hope for tomorrow, right? No hope for something better in this life. And then this is also the reason why so many kids leave the church, because they're taught this idea that my social issues are gone and my social issues will never be fixed here on earth, right? So kids are like, well, how come I can't bring justice to this world? Why do I have to wait to go to heaven, right?
Yes.
So then kids are like, you know what, screw that. I'm going to leave the church because they're not dealing with my issues.
Because they don't care about the world.
Because they don't care about the world.
And they don't care about my friends. They don't care about my gay friends.
Yeah.
They don't care about my black friends. They don't care about my Latino friends. Dang. So I'm outie.
Yeah, and so then they're like, you know what, screw it, I'm leaving that, and then I'm gonna protest because we need to do something about it, right? We need to go forward and do something. But on the other hand, it blows my mind and it makes me sad that I see so many people be so how do I say this? So just ignorant of the issue, just not wanting to accept the fact that something is going on, right? This idea that their people are oppressed because they want to be oppressed or because
of the Democrats passed certain legislation.
They haven't done anything, right, to be able to move themselves, right? Like, and ultimately then you get into the fact of like, oh, what, so like if someone's been pushing you down the whole time because you weren't strong enough to push yourself up, you were down there. Well, no, they're pushing you down, right?
Right.
And I think that, you see these, it's really showing you who people are on social media. It's showing you the things that they're saying, how they're not even, they see this video. I saw someone post about the Atlanta guy who just got murdered by a cop a couple of days ago, right? And, they're doing all these justifications for the police officer. And I'm thinking to myself, like, someone died. Like, regardless of what happened, someone died.
Yeah.
And you are showing little to no emotion towards it.
Yeah. I saw a tweet the other day and it said, someone needs to hear this. But just because somebody's guilty of a crime doesn't mean they deserve to die either by the police. And so there's this narrative, I think, in our culture that is like, hey, if when somebody dies at the hands of the police, whether that be justified or unjustified, right? We always, when evaluating this, and I think particularly as it pertains to people of color, we will say, well, did they commit a crime? Did they do something wrong? Did they comply? And so we ask all these questions.
Or it was the police officer's right because he was frightened.
Yeah, he was afraid for his life. So we ask all these questions that implicitly
better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Right? You have to explain that.
Basically, that's a saying that the police have when they encounter someone and they feel...
At least, to be fair, some police have, right?
Yeah. This is what I read on an article. If you go look at my social page on Facebook, I had posted it. And it was a police officer who was sharing the culture inside of PD from where he had worked. And the thing that he had said was a common phrase, better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. And essentially what he was meaning is, if you're in a situation where you're afraid for your life, kill that person because you don't want to die. You'd rather, if you're going to die, have 12 people in a courtroom sentence you to death rather than some thug gun you down. Gun him down first.
People.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of assumptions in that.
Yeah.
And that's not to cast judgment on...
It just shows the framework and the
police
mentality.
Officers or any things of that nature. And even that I have to say this is sad, but I have to say it because of where we are, right?
Right.
It's the framework.
Are you saying you hate the police, Jordan?
It's a framework that exists that pits us against each other, right? And there are things that we believe about people that we don't know because of the way they look or the way they act, right? Or what part of town they're in that determine how we're going to respond to them. And then the same is true for all of us. But the police have been put in a position to protect us, right? Protect and serve. And so they have a little different position than most people in society.
Yeah.
But to harken back to kind of
Gen
what we're
Z.
talking about with Gen Z and them,
Well, that's why they're in the street.
100%. And I think this is interesting too, because I think there'll probably be a lot of people out there that would say, well, this coronavirus thing, I thought they cared about it. Why are they out there in the streets? And I've been thinking about this, and I'm thinking, maybe they think this is worth risking their life.
I think they're just gangsters.
You know what I'm saying?
There's no, you can't put a mask on for being black, right? Like you can put a mask on for the whole coronavirus, but you can't do that for...
Maybe that's what I'm saying. Maybe they've determined, like, okay, I understand there's this virus and I could catch it, but perhaps me standing up for this issue is more important than my life.
They're just gangsters. That's the only way I know how to look at it. Not, and I say that in a silly way. They're brave, man. Like they've had to. If you just consider what it has meant for this generation to go to school, we have sent kids into a potential war zone. You know, with why? Because of the gun laws that we have passed and that we tolerate in this country. Situation the same way. Why are they in the streets? Because they've realized you can't legislate this stuff. People are going to keep passing laws, and if you're not going to listen to public discourse, you're going to listen to violence.
Yeah.
The reason they're in the streets is because they're saying, listen to me. And if we don't come to the table and start talking to Gen Z and start listening, and this is for me, I'm freaking proud of Gen Zers because they are doing what I wish I had the courage to do when I was a young person. There were so many things that I saw as a young person, but I didn't believe myself. It wasn't until I was like in my late teens that I discovered chat rooms. And that thing was so new for me when I discovered it, to be honest. Those conversations weren't the most wholesome.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Wild.
But now we've got
MSN,
this,
Messenger, and
you know
AOL.
what I'm saying? But we've got this new way of looking at it's like we've had this coming of age of technology where technology is not a kid anymore. It's a teenager, it's an adult, it's growing up, and the people who grew up with it are like all of a sudden realizing they're wiping their eyes and like, man, I can use this thing for this? Not just to send pictures of myself or like look at someone's food. It's like, dang, I can change the world with this thing. People will listen to me.
Yep. And I think that's
So yeah, that's why I think they're in the streets.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you know what? We're in the streets. That's just some gangster stuff, man. Meet me in the streets, son. That's what they're saying.
Look at
that's how I
happened.
see it, bro.
Look at what's happened. Where, Trump signs the executive order for police reform. There are things actually happening.
I mean,
as a consequence of protesting.
Yes,
right?
because of Gen Z.
people
Gen Z did that.
They're starting to realize, I think, too, like that this whole two-party system thing for voting doesn't work. Like I've seen so many people start like posting about that, and it's just going to be so interesting to see what happens to the political party in the next.
Imagine if Gen Z, like all the Gen Zers that are 18 and older, said, "All right, we're all going to register to vote, and we're going to vote, and we're going to vote in this direction." I wonder what would happen. I wonder. Cool. So as we close this thing today, with a little bit of Christian perspective, as we always do, which I think is really pivotal in this conversation. I feel like there's a lot of things that are really hard to make sense of without faith, without Christianity, without this idea that God has made every human being in his image and in his likeness, and we have inherent dignity and value and worth, and as a consequence, nobody should be able to take that away from anybody. And anywhere where the Imago Dei is being devalued is an affront to the God of the universe. And so I think this is why some of the responses we've seen from the church in particular are that egregious. And also B, why it is so necessary for us as Christians to stand up in this cultural moment, or if you would call yourself a Christian, a person of faith, why it's so important for you to stand up right now and be counted. And as it pertains to Gen Z, the thing that I see with them is that, once again, and I know Alex kind of mentioned this earlier, like they care about justice, man.
Yeah.
They care about people. And so justice for them is always in the context of people, which I think that's the way God intended it, right? Like in Christ, God pours out his justice on his son so that we can be reconciled to him. It's very relational in nature. And so if we don't become a people who show how just God is, not just by saying it because we read it in the Bible,
Right.
not just because some theologian wrote a book on it or somebody preached a sermon on it, but because we actually live it out, right? They're going to abandon the faith. And here's what's crazy about it. We have people out there who are wouldn't call themselves a believer, right? And so I would argue that that concept is a Christian concept they've taken, and they're living it out better than we are. Shame on us, bro.
Yeah, the incarnation.
Shame on us as God's people, right? That we would allow something like that to happen.
That's great, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You guys got any thoughts on that?
Go ahead, John.
No, I just feel like for me, it's the whole Matthew 25 thing. What you've done to the least of these, I think it's Matthew 25, right?
Yeah.
What you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. And I think Jesus takes it personally, how we treat people, especially people who are vulnerable. And when you consider Gen Zers, young people, they're saying like, hey, no one's looking out for the least of these. When you consider minorities and the things that our government has done to immigrants, to people of color, like it's the people who are the least of these in our society, the poor, the oppressed, human trafficking. We've seen these wealthy people who have these crazy weird sex rings and they're exploiting poor young girls. It's like, what are poor people? Just the food for rich people to feed off of so they can live their comfortable lives? It's like, man, there's like this view that has to change in American society. And for me, the only view that really handles that without it just becoming violence and chaos and, like I said, gangsters in the street, it's like understanding, especially like you said, how dare us name the name of Christ and not those of us who do not take seriously Matthew 25. And I think we're reaping the consequences of that as a church. So Gen Z is making us take it seriously.
100%.
Yeah. So I think that whoever it is in your circle of sphere, right, whether they make it as a youth pastor, whether someone makes it out of a bad situation, right, we need to realize that those people that make it need to come back into their own communities and free them from the oppression with the power that they have. They need to not just be the adopted son of God, but they need to be God adopting others into that circle as well, right? And I think, it's easy to get caught up in reading, your theology books. It's easy to get caught up in listening to sermons and all this other stuff, right? That can be a blessing and a curse as well, right? But I think we also need to understand that theology when you see who Jesus spends times with, he spends times with the poor, the oppressed, and the marginalized.
The outsiders.
So we need to take what the outsiders are saying and doing seriously, and maybe we need to put down our books and go spend more time with them.
100%.
That's good, man.
And I think that's the point, right? We don't have a relationship with people that don't look like us, and Gen Z does. And look how they've responded.
Man.
And so that should tell us all we need to know. And that's not to say that they have everything right, because I think if we can marry what we understand with what they've experienced, we can see something incredible happen, right? But the problem is we are pitting those two things against each other. And here's the problem. We're the ones who are supposed to lead. So we're guilty of failure because we're leading them down a ditch, right? Because we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so we have a unique opportunity to lead this generation. And I think this generation, and when I say lead, I don't know if maybe we need to throw that word away.
We need to let them lead.
Take responsibility.
We have a unique opportunity to impart wisdom into this generation and watch them lead.
That's good.
And I genuinely believe that they can really begin to change the way our world looks. And I believe that a Gen Z church can really begin to do some crazy influential things in the world that we live in.
Wow.
But I think what has to happen is millennials have to get out the way. Like, I think we as millennials already have to be thinking that our time is over.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already thinking about my time being over. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so
I do.
So what I have to understand is my responsibility is to gather everything I can, to learn everything I can, so that I can develop as many young people as possible, so that I can empower and equip as many young people as possible. And so if that's not my endeavor, if my endeavor is to build something so I can stand on the top of it.
If you're not trying to use them to stay in power as long as possible,
Exactly.
if you're actually trying to change the world,
if you're trying to
take all the
set
young
them
people
up,
with energy, pour into them so they can actually do it, then yeah, that's a little different.
And so, yeah, I think we need to take that mindset and that approach. I think we need to take that mindset and approach when it comes to business, man. I think when it comes to the church, when it comes to education and all those different types of things, everything. I think we got to reframe this thing, man. And I think if we don't,
Gen Z will throw it out.
They'll tear it down and reframe it anyways. And they'll do it without us.
So we're either going to be along for the ride or kicked out of the car.
Exactly. So make your choice, man. All right. Episode 34 in the books. RLTK PHX, Real Talk Phoenix. Grateful to be with you again in this fashion. You got questions, comments, hit us up. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, RLTK PHX. Beginning of the conversation, not the end. We will see you guys again soon. We love you. Peace.
Peace out.